Happy Sunday, everybody. How is everybody doing out there? We're back for part 2 of our beginning of our series from last week. Got some better sound quality on this device here, but I've only got 14 minutes of recording time on here, so we're going to try to get this done short and sweet. Last week we covered the gap theory, which was between Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 and Genesis chapter 1 verse 2. In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Period. Complete statement. There was already a universe inhabited by people on this planet, possibly others, probably others. And then you have verse 2, and then the earth became tohu and abohu, formless and void, and darkness is over the surface of the deep, and God spends 6 days reconstructing the planet that he judged. People that lived here before, those are the people we now call angels. Our ancestors called them faeries, and people today like to call them aliens. You know, they want to talk about UFOs, but our ancestors talked about ferry boats, and Book of Ezekiel talks about, the angels having lights in the sky and all these other far-out type of craft that he actually saw. But it's all the same phenomenon, and those are the people who inhabited this planet before we did, and they show, one of them, a famous one of theirs, shows up, and his name is Satan, and he's in the garden, and he appears as a serpent, anthropomorphically, to Eve, causes her to sin, and Adam to sin with her, and he's attempting to bring the planet back into subjection to his fallen race, his fallen pre-Adamic race. These are the pre-Adamic people, the people who are flying around in saucers, and they're something like 13 or 14 feet tall. And we're going to talk about their progeny, the seed of the serpent that it talked about in Genesis 3. We're going to start in Genesis 6 and explain to you what that means. Okay. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with men, for that he is also flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. Or in other translations it says, for he is corrupt, so his days will be 120 years. And there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, referring to when the Israelites would go into the land of Canaan, which would be their promised land. That was full of giants then too, because the same thing had happened. When the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, and men of renown. In other words, these were the powerful people. And these were the reason for the flood here. Okay, there's another argument that's been being made for the last 150 years or so, because people in the 1800s were trying to get away from mythology, and they thought that this part of the Bible, talking about giants being birthed from, angels coming down and having sex with women, that didn't fit their idea of what a spirit was, or their idea of the Bible not being mythology, because this was too close to what the mythologies say. Well, I say if there's more than one corroborative source for this, whether it's Greek mythology talking about the Titans, or whether it's Genesis chapter 6 talking about the Nephilim, it's the same thing, it's the same account, and you're just getting it from multiple witnesses, multiple historical witnesses. Listen to your ancestors, folks, I'm just saying. So, anyway, so the thing that's been argued for the last 150 years is that the sons of God pertains to the descendants of Seth, being, the righteous son of Adam, and that they married with the Cainites, and took daughters from the line of Cain, the murderer, and so therefore, this has to do with interracial marriage. That's not what it's talking about here, and I'm not making a case for interracial marriage. Anyone who thinks interracial marriage is okay, well, I would challenge you to go read Ezra chapter 9, and then try to tell me that interracial marriage is okay with God. Because, the largest divorce in history takes place in Ezra chapter 9, because God doesn't consider it a divorce. He considered it separating fornicators. So, anyway, this is also an even worse kind of miscegenation taking place literally between two different species, the sons of God and the daughters of men. So, we're going to turn over to the book of Job real quick, and we're going to look at the first chapter, and I'm going to prove to you that this term, the sons of God, is not talking about the line of Seth, as has been proposed by some. But this is the first time this word, B'nai Elohim, or the sons of God, appears in the Bible. And the way it works is the first time something appears, that's what sets the tone for how it's going to be used in later verses, because it's definitive. That's where you get your definition. So then look over here in Job, chapter 1, before Job gets tested. It says, "One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. And the Lord said to Satan, 'Where have you come from?' And Satan answered, 'From roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it.' And then the Lord said to Satan, 'Have you considered my servant Job? There's no one on him like, no one on earth like him, as upright and righteous.'" He does some bragging on Job. But anyway, the angels come in and present themselves before the Lord, and Satan among them. So fallen angels are going up there too and making accusations against righteous men. That's why he's called the accuser. But look right here. See that little footnote next to the word angels? His little letter A. Look down here. Hebrew, the sons of God, meaning B'nai Elohim. The word for angels here is B'nai Elohim. The same word that appears here in Genesis chapter 6, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, implying two different species, angels and male angels, human women, saw that they were fair. They took wives of all which they chose. And there were giants, or in the NIV it'll say Nephilim, meaning the fallen ones. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children by them. And we're finding the bones of these people all over the world now. They look like cone heads. Really, some of them had 6 fingers and 6 toes. There's even some recorded in the Bible in the book of Numbers with 6 fingers and 6 toes. And some of the ones that are being dug up now have literally 6 fingers, 6 toes, and 2 rows of teeth and giant cone heads. Literally huge, elongated skulls. Apparently they have way bigger brains than us. Being, pre-human, Earth inhabitants who like fly around in saucers and whatnot. But anyways, these particular angels got in some trouble for what they did here. I mean, this isn't the end of the story. So we're going to turn quickly over to the book of Jude, where Jude quotes from the book of Enoch. Enoch, who lived before the flood. Enoch was an ancestor, or I think like a grandfather or something, just off the cuff. He was definitely, though, a he was one of the... he's in the genealogy of Noah. Noah was descended from Enoch. So, in Jude, the brother of Jesus says, "I will therefore put you in remembrance, though ye once knew this, how that the Lord, having saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed them that believed not. And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. Even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. Likewise also these filthy dreamers defile the flesh, despise dominion, and speak evil of dignities," talking about the false teachers of his day. But it says these angels, which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, it says, even as Sodom and Gomorrah, in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh. So, whoa, what's he talking about? Well, a lot of people who don't know about Genesis 6, they'll just kind of gloss over that and be like, I'll have to read some more about that later. Like, wonder what that's about. But he is quoting from the pre-flood patriarch Enoch about, or he goes on to quote from Enoch. But that's talking about these angels that sinned. Over here in 2 Peter chapter 2, we're going to start here in verse 4. "For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell," or in the Greek that is Tartarus, which is the cognate of Norse Niflheim, "but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the 8th person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing the flood upon the world of the ungodly." And then he goes on to talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, making them an example of, those who get punished for living ungodly. But what happened leading up to the flood was a lot worse than just interracial miscegenation. This was interspecies. miscegenation with two rival brands of hominids. And just because two species are semi-interfertile does not mean that they should be breeding. When I was in the service, I had read these things in the church before I went into the service. And when I took a med cruise, and we pulled into port in Haifa, Israel. I was actually going to get off the ship in my uniform. I was told not to do that. It wasn't real safe to do that in the Middle East, but I got off, looking like a civilian. I had to borrow some civvies. I didn't have any with me at the time. I was planning on shopping for some clothes when I got off the ship. But anyway, I borrowed some civvies, went into town there, and I took the tour down in Jerusalem. And I saw this sarcophagus that I read about in the book of Numbers, where they killed this 13-foot-tall giant king named Og. And they buried him in a sarcophagus. It was 13 feet long, 6 feet wide, and 3 feet deep after I translated the cubits into feet. And lo and behold, there was an iron sarcophagus, like maybe 30 meters from the Wailing Wall, that was 13 feet long, 6 feet deep, and 3 feet deep and 6 feet wide. Just based on my visual appraisal, that's just about how big this thing was. And these Hasidic Jews were, gargling back and forth at each other in their language and having an argument, and I said, hey, who's in the sarcophagus? Out of curiosity. And they said, oh, it's King David. And it occurred to me that, wow, these guys really don't know their Old Testament, for being Jews, but they try to say that King David was there because I guess a lot of these Jewish tourists, they go back to Israel and they want to go and visit sites associated with David. So these guys are trying to make a buck, so they say David's in it. And I say, well, hey, isn't that King Og, king of Bashan, that Joshua and the Israelites killed when they came in to take the land over? Because there was giants in the land before the flood, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children by them. So isn't this like a hybrid human set of bones you have in this thing? Like, I wanted to crack the thing open. That was before we started seeing, we didn't have Google back then. We couldn't Google search, things that were being found around the world in the way of skulls, and these giant skulls with 2 rows of teeth and, and 6 fingers and 6 toes. And these are like, fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman, just like it said in the book of Joshua. They were scared to go into the land because it is indeed a land that floweth with milk and honey, but it is also a land which devoureth the inhabitants thereof, meaning that they're cannibals, they're eating people, and there's giants in the land. That's why they were afraid to go in to take over the land in the book of Joshua, in the book of, in the book of Moses, in the first 5 books. They had to go through the wilderness for 40 more years before they were allowed to go into the land under Joshua. And then Joshua went in and led the conquest.